Father suspects his 25-year-old paralyzed daughter is hiding something, so he installs cameras to find out. But he is shocked by the footage. In a small country town, John's family lived a quiet life. John, a renowned civil engineer, and his wife Amanda, an elementary school teacher, raised their two daughters, Anna and Grace, with love and attention. Anna, at the age of 10, was curious and active, always ready to learn something new. Grace, at the age of 8, followed in the footsteps of her older sister, sharing the same thirst for adventure. The family home, surrounded by a well-kept garden, was often the scene of banter and laughter. John, when he was not immersed in construction projects, dedicated himself to playing and teaching his daughters. Amanda, in turn, cultivated a love of reading in girls, spending entire afternoons reading to them in the library of the family home. Deciding to take advantage of the beautiful spring day, John proposed a walk through the countryside to break the routine and breathe some fresh air. The idea was received with enthusiasm, and soon everyone was in the car, heading to one of the nearby nature reserves. During the trip, John shared stories from his own childhood, spent in that same region. He told about the mischief with friends, the discoveries in the woods and streams, and the afternoons of fishing. Amanda interspersed her husband's stories with plans for the upcoming school holidays, discussing possible destinations for a longer trip. Laughter and conversation filled the car, and the road continued through green hills. John, always cautious behind the wheel, maintained a moderate speed, enjoying the scenery with his family. However, the peace was abruptly interrupted. A truck, coming from the opposite direction, lost control while trying to dodge an animal on the road. John reacted instinctively, turning the steering wheel to avoid a head-on collision, but the car was hit from the side. The impact was devastating, throwing the family's vehicle off the road, where it flipped several times before coming to a stop. The silence that followed was deafening. John, semi-conscious, felt the sharp pain of his own injuries, but his thoughts were with his family. When rescuers arrived, they quickly began rescue work, but what they found was heartbreaking. Amanda and Grace did not resist their injuries and were pronounced dead at the scene. Anna was found unconscious, with serious injuries. In the months after the accident, while John dealt with physical recovery and grief, Anna woke up from the coma to face a new reality. Doctors confirmed that she had lost mobility in her legs due to spinal damage. The news was a devastating second blow to John, who now saw himself as Anna's sole guardian and caretaker, determined to rebuild their lives despite the immense void left by the loss. After the accident that irreversibly transformed their lives, John found himself in a dark world of grief and responsibility. For the first few months, the house that once echoed with laughter and future plans was now silent, marked only by the sounds of the wheels of Anna's chair and John's heavy footsteps. Amanda and Grace's absence was a constant emptiness, a deafening silence that stretched to every corner of the house. John, though consumed by grief over the loss of his wife and youngest daughter, knew he needed to be strong for Anne. He devoted himself fully to the care of his surviving daughter, who was now facing her own battle to adapt to a life in a wheelchair. The house was adapted to be more accessible, ramps were installed, the furniture was rearranged to allow for better mobility, and a bedroom was transformed into a recovery and physiotherapy space for Anna. In the days when Anne mourned the loss of her mother and sister, John found himself in a difficult position, trying to comfort his daughter while he himself could barely manage his own grief. The nights were long, with conversations at Anna's bedside, where John read her the same books that Amanda used to read, in an attempt to bring some comfort and normality. Professionally, John reduced his working hours. He negotiated with his company to work partially from home, allowing him to be present for Anna throughout the day. Although financially challenging, this decision strengthened the bond between father and daughter, a bond that became their raison d'être. Anna's rehabilitation was a constant process. John accompanied her to each physiotherapy session, encouraging her to keep going, even on the most difficult days. He became medically well-versed, discussing treatments and progress with doctors with a fervor that astonished even health professionals. He transformed himself from engineer to caregiver, a role he never imagined for himself, but which he embraced with all love and dedication. Mentally, the journey was just as arduous. John sought support from a grief group, where he shared his experiences and listened to those of others. Learning to deal with her pain while helping Anna deal with hers was a delicate balance, full of ups and downs. In therapy sessions, John learned to process his grief, and that, in turn, helped him to be an even better support for Anna. Every little achievement of Anna was a victory for John. When she was able to move the wheel of her wheelchair for the first time on her own, or when she truly smiled after months of sadness, those moments brought a mixture of joy and sadness to John. He was immensely proud of his daughter, her strength and resilience, but every step forward was also a reminder of the two precious lives they had lost. John's life became a cycle of care, work, and therapy sessions, for both him and Anna. In every effort, every gesture, and every word of encouragement, John found a little healing for both of them. He clung to the hope that, with time and love, they could find a new meaning for their lives together. In John and Anna's new reality, each day began before the sun rose. John, who adopted the routine of a meticulous caregiver, woke up early to prepare breakfast and organize the house so that Anna could navigate as much autonomy as possible within the physical limitations she faced. The house had been transformed, widened hallways, carpets removed, and lowered furniture were now permanent features in his home. Hannah's morning began with the help of John, who carefully helped her out of bed and into her wheelchair. After breakfast, which often included Anna's favorite fruits and eggs prepared by John, the day's activities began. Physiotherapy sessions at home were a crucial part of the routine. John had hired a specialist physiotherapist who visited the house twice a week, but on other days, he was the one who guided Anna through the exercises. The living room was adapted to be an exercise space, with equipment such as resistance bands, a physiotherapy ball and a small exercise machine for the legs. Hannah, despite the challenging circumstances, showed an inner strength that astonished all who knew her. Under John's guidance, she pushed herself through each session, focused on gaining strength and, perhaps, some mobility. John meticulously documented every progress in a notebook, writing down every little move Anna could make, every new achievement, no matter how small. In the afternoon, while Anna was doing her schoolwork, she had been homeschooled since the accident, John working in the office set up in the guest room. He maintained part of his career as a civil engineer through consultancies that he could carry out from home. This new configuration allowed him to always be nearby, available for any of Anna's needs. After school, John and Anna often spent time together in the garden. John had built an accessible path that allowed Anna to explore the garden in her wheelchair. This was a time of leisure and relaxation, where father and daughter could talk about various subjects, from small daily joys to dreams for the future. John used these moments to teach Anna about nature, something he and Amanda have always valued. Evenings were reserved for quiet moments, and often for watching movies or reading books together. John always chose books and movies that could inspire Anna, stories of overcoming and courage, reflecting the lessons he hoped to pass on to her. Over the years, John began to notice small details that subtly caught his attention. Initially, these signs were barely perceptible, small flashes that could easily be dismissed as the fruit of her imagination or desire to see her daughter regain mobility. One afternoon, while Anna was concentrating on a painting, John noticed a slight movement in Anna's toes as she was engrossed in her art. The movement was subtle, almost like an involuntary reflex, but it was there. John watched, heart racing, wondering if what he had seen was real. Over the next few days, he began to observe more closely, looking for additional signs that might indicate a recovery of mobility that Anna had not mentioned. These observations became part of John's daily life, a second plane of thought as he watched Anna in her daily activities. He noticed more movements, small spasms in Anna's toes when she thought no one was looking. Each new sign filled John with a mixture of hope and confusion. Why would Hannah hide such progress? Doubt began to consume John, and he often found himself lost in thought, trying to understand the possible reasons behind Anna's attitude. He knew that confronting her directly could be delicate and potentially damaging, considering everything she had been through. On the other hand, the idea that her daughter could be withholding such vital information was disturbing. After weeks of thinking about it a lot, John made a decision that would change the course of their lives. He decided to install hidden cameras at home. The decision was not easy. The act of surveillance on his own daughter weighed on his conscience, which could be seen as a breach of trust. However, driven by a desperate need to understand the truth behind the movements he had observed, John felt that this was the only way to get the answers he needed without putting Anna in a defensive position. Taken by the decision to install hidden cameras in his home, John immersed himself in meticulous research into the types of devices available in the market. He needed something discreet, effective, and easy to operate on, as he did not wish his daughter to find out about his actions before he could fully understand the situation. The choice fell on a series of small, high-resolution cameras that could be controlled and monitored by your smartphone. Each camera had loop recording capability, ensuring that he didn't miss any important moments. With the cameras in hand, John carefully planned how and where he would install them to maximize visibility without arousing suspicion. He opted for strategic locations, one hidden in the living room's bookshelf, another camouflaged in a decorative plant in the hallway, and a third disguised behind a painting in the kitchen. John spent an entire weekend adjusting the camera angles to make sure everything was perfectly positioned. During the installation, John felt a mixture of emotions. On the one hand, there was anxiety and guilt for invading his own daughter's privacy, something he never imagined he would do. On the other hand, the need to protect Anna and understand the truth behind the signs he had observed motivated him to go ahead with his plan. With the cameras in place and operational, John began monitoring Anna's daily activities in a way he had never done before. Her every move was now recorded, every gesture analyzed. John divided himself between his daily activities and constant surveillance through his smartphone, always on the lookout for any sign that might indicate that Anna was, in fact, regaining her mobility in a hidden way. In the first few days, John didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. Anna continued her daily activities apparently unaware of the hidden cameras. She did her physical therapy exercises, watched television in the living room, and read her favorite books, always using a wheelchair to move around the house. However, as the days passed, the tension increased for John. Doubt began to give way to a feeling of despair, an almost hope that he would discover nothing, that everything would be nothing more than his imagination. However, he knew he needed to stick to the plan until he was sure there was nothing more to be discovered. This constant vigilance began to affect John in ways he had not anticipated. He became more withdrawn and distracted, his mind always occupied with what the cameras might reveal. The weight of guilt for his distrust and the invasion of Anna's privacy began to weigh on him. John constantly questioned whether he was doing the right thing, whether this intrusion was justifiable even under the circumstances. He remembered the happy times they shared, the mutual trust that had always been the foundation of their relationship. Now, that foundation seemed to be at risk, shaken by his decision to install hidden cameras. As John dealt with his internal conflicts, the cameras continued to roll, inching closer to the moment when the truth about Anna's condition would be revealed, for better or for worse. This revelation was destined to change the dynamic between father and daughter, leading them to confront the secrets that Anna could be hiding. After weeks of tense surveillance, the moment John had been dreading and waiting for has finally arrived. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and Anna was alone at home. John had left for a brief work meeting, something he had rarely done since the accident, but the cameras kept his constant watch. While monitoring the recordings on his smartphone, John saw something that made his heart stop. Anna, thinking she was completely alone, got up from the wheelchair with an ease that contradicted months of supposed immobility. She walked to the bookshelf, picked up a book, and, without any sign of difficulty, returned to her chair. This movement was fluid, natural, without hesitation. John felt an overwhelming mix of emotions. Relief to see his daughter walk again, a sight he had prayed for every night. But at the same time, a deep sense of betrayal and confusion flooded his spirit. Why would Anna hide something so significant? Why did she continue to fake her disability? With a heavy heart and a tumultuous mind, John decided it was time to confront Anna. He needed to understand her reasons, he needed to hear from her the truth behind this staging. When he returned home, he found Anna in the living room, reading the book she had taken from the shelf. Sitting down across from her, John took a deep breath, struggling to keep his cool and composure. "Anna," he began, his voice trembling, "we need to talk about something very important." Anna looked at him, an expression of uncertainty on her face. "I know you can walk, Anna," John said directly, watching his daughter's reaction intently. The surprise and shock were evident on Anna's face, who, pale, tried to formulate an answer. "Dad, I can explain," she stammered, clearly shaken at being discovered. John beckoned her to continue, though her every word was like a blow to his heart. Anna confessed that, after years of intensive rehabilitation, she began to regain the mobility of her legs. Initially, it was only minimal movements, but gradually, she was able to walk again. However, fear of reaction from the outside world, the pressure of dealing with expectations, and uncertainty about how John would react to this change led her to continue faking her inability. "I was afraid, Dad. Fear of how everything would change again, fear of losing your attention, your care. You have dedicated yourself so much to me, and I just didn't want it to end," Anna explained, tears streaming down her face. John, listening to his daughter's words, felt a surge of conflicting emotions. The pain of betrayal, the realization of Anna's vulnerability, and a deep sadness that she felt she needed to continue with this charade to maintain her relationship. The confrontation, although painful, was also necessary for the beginning of a new phase in their lives. They decided together that it was time to face the truth, not only about Anna's mobility, but also about the feelings they both held. It was the beginning of a long path of reconciliation and healing, a path they were now determined to walk together. After the initial confrontation and Anna's revelation about her ability to walk, John and Anna faced a moment of emotionally charged silence. Sitting across from each other, feelings of betrayal and vulnerability hung heavily in the air. John, still trying to process his daughter's confession, decided they needed more time to discuss and fully understand the situation. Anna began to open her heart, revealing more about her internal conflicts and the reasons that led her to continue with the charade. "Once I started to regain mobility, I felt incredibly confused," she explained, her voice choked with emotion. "With every little move I could make, a part of me lit up with hope, but another part sank in fear." She described how the trauma of the accident and the loss of her mother and sister still haunted her thoughts on a daily basis. Physical therapy, while physically beneficial, could not ease the emotional burden she carried. Anna feared that by revealing her recovery, things would change drastically and that she would somehow lose her father's constant support. "I saw how you struggled to keep everything right, Dad, and how dedicated you were to taking care of me. I didn't want to add another change to our already changed life," she confessed. John listened intently, Anna's every word adding layers to his understanding of the complexity of his daughter's feelings. He recognized the depth of pain Anna felt, realizing that physical rehabilitation was only one part of her recovery journey. "I understand, Anna," he said softly. "And I'm sorry I didn't realize how much you were still struggling internally." This moment opened space for a deeper conversation. Anna shared how she felt isolated in her own fears, worried about overwhelming John, who was already facing his own pain. John, for his part, expressed his regret for not having created an environment in which Anna felt comfortable to share her true progressions and fears. They discussed the importance of mutual trust. John assured Anna that his dedication to her would never diminish, regardless of her physical condition. "My priority is and always will be your well-being, whether you walk or not," he reaffirmed. The morning after the confrontation, John and Anna sat down again, this time with a clearer mind and a common goal, to establish a concrete plan for reconciliation and emotional and physical recovery. John approached the situation with a mind focused on the solution, while Anna, strengthened by the honesty of the night before, was ready to take a more active role in her rehabilitation in the new phase of her life. Together, they outlined several steps that they felt were crucial to the healing process. First, they decided to establish a daily routine that included not only Anna's physical activities, but also moments dedicated to communication. The intention was to create an environment where both could express themselves freely and without judgment, something Anna admitted had been missing in her decision to hide her recovery. To help with emotional reconciliation, John proposed that they start attending therapy sessions together. He researched and found a therapist who specialized in family dynamics and trauma, who could help guide them through the emotional challenges they were facing. Hannah accepted the idea with enthusiasm, relieved by her father's willingness to be actively involved in this aspect of her recovery. In addition, they agreed that Anna would begin to take on more responsibilities within the home, according to her capabilities. John saw this as an opportunity for Anna to gain more independence and confidence, while Anna saw it as a step to show her gratitude and ability, strengthening her self-esteem. John also pledged to be more open about his own struggles. He recognized that he had closed himself off emotionally, focusing entirely on Anna's well-being but neglecting his own emotional needs. Anna, for her part, promised to be more transparent about her feelings and progress, understanding that honesty would be the basis of her recovery and relationship. These changes, while positive, have brought with them a new set of challenges. John had to learn to balance his desire to protect and with the need to allow her to face her own challenges. Anna, facing the world with a new perspective, had to deal with the insecurities that came with exposing her vulnerability. However, both were determined to face these challenges together. The first sessions of joint therapy proved to be intense, but incredibly beneficial. They openly discussed their fears and frustrations. Each session served to undo the knots of accumulated misunderstandings and resentments, replacing them with understanding. Anna began to attend more intense physiotherapy sessions, now that she was willing to openly show her ability to move. The physiotherapist, updated on the new situation, developed a personalized exercise plan, aimed at strengthening Anna's muscles that had been little used. At each session, Anna demonstrated her determination, working hard, albeit painfully, to improve her mobility and strength. John set up a small gym at home with adapted equipment, allowing Anna to practice daily. He actively participated in these sessions, sometimes as an assistant, sometimes as an exercise partner, which strengthened his bond. In parallel with physiotherapy, Anna began to have individual psychological therapy sessions. In these meetings, she worked on deeper issues related to the trauma of the accident and the grief over the loss of her mother and sister. Therapy provided a safe space for Anna to explore her emotions, face her insecurities, and learn to build a new self-image. As Anna continued to progress in her physical rehabilitation, the confidence she developed within the safety of her home began to extend to the outside world. John, though initially hesitant, realized that it was essential to Anne's growth and independence that she begin to expose herself more publicly. They then decided that it was time for Anna to start taking her first steps in public. The idea of walking in public was both exciting and terrifying for Anna. She knew she would face prying eyes and possibly intrusive questions about her condition. To prepare her, John and the therapist worked with Anna on coping techniques to deal with possible uncomfortable interactions. They practiced in controlled environments, such as parks that are not very frequented during off-peak hours. The chosen day was sunny and pleasant, a perfect climate for a new beginning. John and Anna headed to a local park. With John's support by her side, Anna got out of the wheelchair and took her first hesitant steps. With each step, his heart beat with hope and nervousness. People in the park who noticed Anna seemed curious, but John's calm presence offered her the reassurance she needed. Some park-goers, who knew Anna's story, offered encouraging smiles and kind words of support. Anna felt a mixture of pride and relief when she realized that she could face the outside world without fear. That first outing was a meaningful Ethan for Anna. Although emotionally exhausting, the experience strengthened her confidence and showed her that she could resume her life more normally than she had imagined. Encouraged by the success of this first experience, Anna began to participate in more activities outside the home. John was with her all the time, but he was increasingly trying to allow Anne to explore her independence. They visited museums, movie theaters, and other social events, where Anna was able to interact with others and practice being in public with her new identity. As Anna became more confident in her abilities and more comfortable in public settings, the natural next step was to focus on developing her autonomy. John realized that while he would always be there to support his daughter, it was crucial to Anna's development that she start making more decisions for herself and managing her own daily activities. John began to encourage Anna to take on more responsibilities at home. This included tasks she could do while sitting or with support, such as helping prepare meals, organizing the pantry, and managing the laundry. Each task successfully completed boosted Anna's self-confidence and reinforced her sense of contribution to the household. Anna also began to take more control over her health and rehabilitation. Under John's supervision, she learned how to schedule her own doctor's appointments and physical therapy sessions, discuss treatments with healthcare professionals, and keep a record of her progress. John was always around to help, but he made a conscious effort to have Anna lead these interactions. In the educational sphere, Anna became more involved in her school decisions. She chose the subjects she wanted to delve into and began exploring clubs and extracurricular activities. John supported each choice, helping her organize her transportation and schedules, but encouraged Anna to be primarily responsible for her academic life. Anna also started going out more with friends, initially accompanied by John, but gradually gaining independence to go on dates and events alone. These social experiences were vital to his personal and social development, allowing him to forge new friendships. John realized that while his role as a caregiver would never completely end, he needed to redefine his responsibilities to allow Anna to grow up. They regularly discussed the balance between support and independence, adjusting it as Anna's needs and comfort changed. This process also involved significant emotional development for Anna. She learned to face challenges, solve problems, and deal with stress more autonomously. Therapy continued to be an important part of her life, helping her process her emotions and fears as she navigated this new phase of greater independence. For John, this period was an adjustment. He had to learn to let go of the reins and trust in Anna's ability to take care of herself. It was a test of her own resilience and ability to adapt to her daughter's growing independence. The development of Anna's autonomy brought positive results not only for her, but for John as well. Anna felt more empowered and confident, and John found more time to devote to his own interests and well-being. As Anna became increasingly independent and confident in her abilities and life management, a new desire began to take shape in her heart, the desire to live alone. This idea was both a test of his newfound independence and a natural need to explore life on his own. Anna brought up the idea during a quiet dinner at home. John, while not entirely surprised given Anna's growth trajectory, felt mixed emotions. He was proud of his daughter's progress, but the thought of seeing her leave home also sparked a twinge of worry and sadness. However, he listened intently as Anna explained her reasons and how prepared she felt for this next step. Determined to support Hannah, John helped her carefully plan her move. They discussed what it would take to ensure that Anna's new home was safe and affordable. Together, they researched apartments, focusing on locations that were not only accessible, but also close to conveniences such as supermarkets, medical centers, and public transportation. Anna was involved in every step, from choosing the apartment to decorating and organizing the space. John ensured that all necessary adaptations were made. Throughout the process, John was by Anna's side, offering both logistical and emotional support. They discussed how they would keep in regular contact, planning weekly visits and daily phone or video conversations. John wanted to make sure Anna knew that even though she was living alone, he would always be available to her. When the day of change came, it was a significant moment for both of them. Packing Anna's belongings, many of which carried memories of their life together, was emotional. John felt a mixture of nostalgia and optimism as he watched his daughter embark on this new phase of her life. In the first few days after the move, Anna faced the natural challenges of adapting to a new environment. However, she was well prepared and quickly established a new routine. She appreciated the freedom to live on her own, and the experience reinforced her self-confidence and independence. For John, the days after Anna's move were a day of reflection. He thought about the path they had traveled together, from the tragic accident to this moment. He was comforted to see that Hannah had not only recovered physically, but had also become a strong and independent young woman. This new phase brought a change in the father-daughter dynamic, with Anna fully taking the reins of her life and John learning to adapt to the role of a father to an independent adult. Despite the mixed emotions, both felt grateful and excited for what the future might bring. With Anna's move to her new apartment, a new stage of her life began, marked by even greater independence and the exploration of new opportunities. This phase was a period of significant growth for Anna, as she adjusted to life alone and made daily decisions on her own. In the first months after moving in, Anna dedicated herself to making the apartment truly her own. She took care of the decor carefully, choosing each item to reflect her personal taste and specific needs. One of Anna's first actions was to establish a new support network in her new community. She introduced herself to the neighbors, explaining her condition and how she managed her life independently. Despite her preparation, Anna faced unexpected challenges, such as dealing with household maintenance issues and minor emergencies. Each situation was a learning opportunity and reinforced his ability to solve problems independently. She learned to coordinate with contractors and negotiate solutions, skills that increased her confidence and autonomy. Professionally, Anna began to explore new opportunities. She had completed her formal education and was now looking for a job that would not only accommodate her physical needs but also challenge her intellectual and creative abilities. After a few interviews, she got a job at a local company. In terms of social life, Anna strived to maintain a healthy balance between time alone and with friends. She often organized small gatherings in her apartment, which allowed her to maintain her friendships and expand her social circle. John visited Anna regularly, but always respecting her independence. These visits were times for them to share updates about their lives, discuss books and movies, or simply enjoy each other's company. John, though at times worried as any parent would be, felt comforted to see his daughter not only surviving but thriving on her own. As Anna consolidated her independence and grew into her new life, another significant change was on the way. She met someone special, a young man named Ethan, who shared many of her interests and values. Their relationship quickly blossomed, bringing a new dimension of joy and companionship to Anna's life. Ethan was introduced to Anna by mutual friends during an event for young professionals. He worked as a graphic designer and had a deep interest in digital accessibility, a field that intrigued Anna given her own life experience. The connection between them was almost instantaneous, marked by deep conversations and a mutual respect for each other's life journeys. Over the next few months, Anna and Ethan spent a lot of time together, exploring their shared passions. Ethan was not only understanding and supportive of Anna's needs, but also genuinely admired for her resilience and determination. For Anna, finding someone who saw her beyond her past was deeply meaningful. As the relationship evolved, it became clear to both of them that they wanted to build a future together. During a small meeting with friends and family, Ethan proposed to Anna. The moment was one of great celebration, marked by joy and optimism. John, upon meeting Ethan and seeing the love between him and Anna, felt immense gratitude and relief. Knowing that her daughter had found someone who truly loved and respected her gave her even more confidence that Hannah was well on her way to a life of happiness. Ethan's family also welcomed Anna warmly, admiring her strength and the love evident between the couple. With their engagement, Anna and Ethan began planning their future together, discussing where they would live, how they would combine their careers and interests, and how they would continue to support each other. This engagement period was a time of celebration and planning, full of expectations for a shared future. For Anna, Each step forward reaffirmed her journey from the accident to the independent, committed woman she had become, ready to begin the next phase of her life with the man she loved. With Anna and Ethan's engagement firmed, the preparations for the wedding began to take shape. This period was not only a celebration of love, but also an opportunity for Anna and John to reflect on the changes and growth they had experienced over the years. Anna and Ethan wanted a wedding that reflected their values and personalities. They opted for an intimate ceremony, attended by family and close friends, in a place that was accessible and welcoming. Every detail was carefully planned, from the choice of the menu to the decoration. Anna took the lead in the organization, demonstrating her planning and coordination skills. Ethan, in turn, focused on the visual part, creating invitations and souvenirs that captured the essence of the couple. John helped as he could, offering emotional and logistical support whenever needed. For John, the preparations for his daughter's wedding were a period of intense emotional reflection. He thought about the journey they had taken since the tragic accident that changed their lives. Seeing Anna so happy and independent, ready to start her own family, was the fulfillment of many of the hopes he had in the darkest days. John also reflected on his own life. Dedication to Anna had been his main focus for so many years, and now, with her starting a new life with Ethan, he felt a mixture of relief, pride, and a certain emptiness. It was a time to reassess their own needs and desires for the future. For Anna, the wedding preparations were not only about the event itself, but about the celebration of a new stage of life. Each choice reflected her growth and the lessons learned along her journey. As the wedding day approached, the anticipation grew. Anna and Ethan were eager to celebrate their commitment to each other, as John prepared to witness yet another Ethan in his daughter's life. The wedding day has finally arrived, marking a moment of celebration and joy. The ceremony, carefully planned to reflect the couple's union, also symbolized John's transition to a different role in his daughter's life. Held in a beautiful garden that was both affordable and aesthetically pleasing. Anna, radiant in an elegant dress, walked in with John at her side, who led her down the aisle with a mixture of pride and palpable emotion. Ethan, visibly moved to see Anna approaching, waited next to the celebrant. The vows they exchanged were personal and touching, emphasizing the respect, support, and love they promised each other. The guests, made up of close friends and family, witnessed the event with tears and smiles, happy for the couple. The reception followed in a hall next to the garden. The music, a mix of romantic classics and modern tracks, invited guests to dance and celebrate. John, although sometimes melancholy from the transition in his life, felt deeply happy for Anna and enjoyed the party, talking to friends. With the formalization of Anna's union, John began to consider what would come next for him. He thought of resuming old passions and hobbies that he had put aside during the years of intensive care for Anna. John also contemplated the possibility of traveling, exploring new places and cultures, something he had always wanted to do, but put off to take care of Anna. Anna, now married and embarking on her own journey with Ethan, felt thrilled and grateful for all that John had done for her. She was excited about the possibilities of the future, eager to build a life with Ethan. The wedding not only celebrated Anna and Ethan's union, but also the legacy of love and care that John provided. That legacy, now passed on through Anna's love for Ethan, was a testament to the profound impact a father can have on his daughter's life. At the end of the day, as the last guests said goodbye and the lights in the hall began to go out, John, Anna, and Ethan shared one last moment together. They expressed their gratitude, acknowledging the beginning of a new stage full of promise and discoveries. John left with a sense of accomplishment. One night a few days after the wedding, John had a vivid dream about his deceased wife, Amanda. In the dream, they were talking in their old garden, where Amanda expressed her satisfaction and approval of the choices John had made in raising Anna. Waking up from this dream, John felt a deep inner peace. He took it as a sign that Amanda was content with how he had led his family through the challenges, and that it was now time for John to focus more on himself. Motivated, John began to explore interests he had put aside. He resumed his hobby of astronomy, spending nights stargazing and reflecting on the universe. John also signed up for pottery classes, finding joy and satisfaction in the creative process and the new friendships he formed. John also began to explore new social relationships, expanding his circle of friends and eventually starting to date again. He met someone special who shared his interests and respected the journey he had traveled. By the end of this chapter of his life, John felt complete and gratified. He saw Anna happy and loved, living a full life with Ethan, and he himself found a new beginning full of possibilities. The journey was long and full of challenges, but also of growth and learning. John looked to the future with hope, ready to enjoy every moment, knowing that he and Anna would continue to grow and support each other, each in their own way. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, give it a like, and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. See you in the next story.